The daycare was winding down for the evening. The soft hum of parents chatting with caregivers, filling the air as little feet shuffled toward the door. It had been a long day of finger painting, story time and giggles. But now, one by one, the children were heading home. Ms. Carter, one of the senior caregivers, glanced at the clock. 6:15 p.m. Almost closing time. She was wiping down a table when she saw one of the last parents of the evening walk in. It was a man she hadn't met before, but that wasn't unusual. Sometimes a relative or a friend would come to pick up a child if the parents were caught up at work. He moved with a quiet confidence. His steps measured. His expression calm but unreadable. He scanned the room briefly before making his way toward little Emily, a bright-eyed 4-year-old who had been drawing a picture of her family just moments ago. As soon as the man knelt beside her and said her name, Emily looked up, blinked, and hesitated. Ms. Carter's stomach tightened. It wasn't that Emily seemed scared, but something about her reaction felt off. Kids were unpredictable. Sometimes they were just surprised. Sometimes they were tired and fussy. But this was different. Usually children lit up when their parent or loved one arrived, rushing forward with arms wide. But Emily just sat there for a second, her crayon slipping from her fingers onto the paper. The man reached for her hand gently. "Come on, sweetheart," he said, his voice warm and even. "Time to go home." Emily hesitated again, but eventually nodded, standing up slowly. Ms. Carter wiped her hands on a towel and stepped forward, smiling politely. "Hi there. I don't think we've met before. I'm Ms. Carter. I've been taking care of Emily today." The man stood up straight and offered a small smile in return. "Nice to meet you. I'm her dad." Something about the way he said it made Ms. Carter's stomach twist again. It wasn't the words. Those were perfectly normal. It was the way he delivered them. A little too smooth, a little too rehearsed, like he was anticipating the question and had already prepared the perfect response. She glanced at Emily, searching for any sign of comfort or recognition in her face. The little girl wasn't clinging to him the way children usually did with their parents. Instead, she just stood there, still, her tiny hands curled at her sides. Ms. Carter forced another smile. "Oh, I haven't seen you here before. Do you usually pick her up?" The man's jaw tightened, just for a second. Then he chuckled softly. "No, her mum usually does. But she's stuck in a meeting, so she asked me to come instead." That made sense. It happened all the time. Parents had busy schedules, but something still didn't sit right. "Did she call the office to let us know?" Ms. Carter asked casually, keeping her voice light. The man's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker, something brief, something almost too quick to catch. "I'm not sure. She texted me and told me to come." Ms. Carter nodded. Slowly. It wasn't a solid reason to doubt him, but it was enough to make her pause. The daycare had a strict policy. If someone new was picking up a child, the parent had to call ahead and inform the staff. "Let me just check real quick," she said, still smiling. "It's just standard protocol." She turned toward the front desk, but before she could take a step, the man spoke again, this time with a little more edge in his voice. "Look, I get it. You're just doing your job," he said, forcing another smile. "But I'm her father. We don't have time for all this. We need to get going." Ms. Carter's fingers hovered over the desk phone. Something wasn't right. Emily was still standing there, silent, not pulling at his arm, not talking about her day, just watching. Ms. Carter exhaled slowly. "I understand, but I really do need to verify." "Just 1 second." The man's fingers flexed at his side. His smile was still there, but his patience was thinning. "Fine," he muttered. Ms. Carter picked up the phone and quickly dialed the number on file for Emily's mom. The ringtone echoed in her ear. Once, twice. Come on, pick up. The man shifted his weight slightly, glancing toward the door. A third ring, then a voice. Hello? Relief flooded Ms. Carter. Hi, Ms. Thompson. This is Ms. Carter from the daycare. I just wanted to confirm. Before she could finish, Emily's mom cut in, her voice sharp with confusion. Wait, why are you calling? I'm just about to leave work to pick her up. Ms. Carter's grip on the phone tightened. Her pulse quickened. Something cold crept into her chest. She turned her gaze back to the man standing before her. He was watching her carefully now, as if trying to gauge her next move. She swallowed hard. Then, slowly, she put the phone on speaker. Ms. Thompson, she said carefully. Her eyes locked on the man. There's someone here claiming to be Emily's father. He says you sent him. Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. I didn't send anyone. Miss Carter's breath caught in her throat. As she watched the man bolt toward the door, her fingers fumbled to end the call, her heart hammering as she stepped forward on instinct. Stop him, she called out, her voice sharp and urgent. A second passed, just enough time for shock to ripple through the few remaining staff members near the entrance. The man had almost reached the door when one of the other caregivers, Mr. Lopez, stepped in his path, arms outstretched. Hey, hold on! But the man didn't stop. He shoved past with surprising force, sending Mr. Lopez stumbling back into a chair. A few papers scattered onto the floor as the door flung open. Cold air rushed in as the man took off down the front steps, his shoes slamming against the pavement. Ms. Carter barely had time to think. She rushed to the doorway, her pulse racing. The daycare was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, but this time of evening, the sidewalks were mostly empty. The streetlights had just flickered on, casting long shadows on the pavement. She turned back to see Emily still standing there, her tiny body stiff, her eyes wide and scared. It's okay, sweetheart, Ms. Carter murmured, her voice shaking, despite her best effort to sound calm. Emily didn't say a word. Ms. Carter's hands were trembling as she grabbed the phone again. I'm calling the police, she said, looking at Mr. Lopez, who was already rubbing his shoulder from the rough shove. I'll check outside, he said, already moving toward the door. Ms. Carter barely heard him as she pressed the numbers. Chetan, what's your emergency? She took a breath. There was an attempted abduction at our daycare. A man came in claiming to be a parent, but the child's mother confirmed she didn't send him. He ran. He's heading down Oak Street now. The dispatcher's voice remained calm, asking for details. What the man looked like, what he was wearing, which direction he ran. Ms. Carter answered quickly, her eyes flicking toward Emily, who still hadn't moved. As soon as the call ended, she knelt in front of the little girl. Emily, honey, she said gently, keeping her voice low. Do you know that man? Emily hesitated. Then finally, she shook her head. Ms. Carter swallowed. Has he ever spoken to you before? Another shake of the head. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity. This wasn't a mix-up. This man had come here knowing Emily's name, knowing to pick her up, and he wasn't her father. A chill ran down her spine. A few minutes later, Emily's mother, Ms. Thompson, came rushing through the front doors, her face pale with fear. She spotted her daughter instantly, dropping to her knees and pulling her close. Oh, my baby, she whispered, her voice shaking. Are you okay? Did he touch you? Emily clung to her mother, burying her face in her shoulder. Ms. Carter stepped back, giving them a moment, but she could feel the weight of the situation settling over the room. Did you recognize him at all? She finally asked, her voice soft but urgent. Ms. Thompson shook her head. No, I have no idea who he is. The front door opened again, and 2 police officers stepped in, their expressions serious. One of them approached, a notebook already in hand. We got the call, he said. Can someone walk us through what happened? Ms. Carter took a deep breath, steadying herself before recounting every detail. The officers listened carefully, asking for descriptions, confirming details. Ms. Carter described the man as best as she could. Medium height, dark jacket, short brown hair, clean shaven. One of the officers nodded. We'll check nearby cameras and start a search, he said. But this wasn't random. He knew her name. He knew her schedule. That means he's been watching. Ms. Thompson let out a shaky breath, holding Emily even tighter. How did he know? She whispered. How? Did he know where she'd be? No one had an answer. But as the officer's words settled over them, a horrifying realization crept in. This wasn't just some stranger who happened to walk in. This was someone who had been planning, watching, waiting for the perfect moment, and he had almost succeeded. The weight of the officer's words hung heavy in the air. Ms. Carter could see it in Ms. Thompson's face. The fear, the disbelief, the horrifying realization that someone had been watching her daughter. Emily still hadn't spoken. She clung to her mother, her small hands gripping the fabric of her coat. Ms. Carter wished she had better news to offer, something to ease the fear in the mother's eyes. But there were still too many unanswered questions. One of the officers turned to Ms. Thompson. Is there anyone at all, who might have a reason to take Emily? Ms. Thompson shook her head quickly. No, no one. Then, after a pause, she added, Her father and I divorced last year, but he's never done anything like this. He loves her. He would never. The officer nodded, jotting something down in his notebook. What about anyone from work? Neighbors? Friends? Ms. Thompson's brow furrowed. I don't think so. I mean, I have co-workers, but none of them even know where Emily's daycare is. And my neighbors. I've never had issues with them. The officer glanced at his partner. We'll need a list of anyone who's had access to your routine. If this man knew Emily's name and where she'd be, he either followed you for a while or got information from someone. Ms. Carter felt a chill at that thought. The idea that this man had been lurking, planning, waiting. It made her stomach turn. Just then, the radio on the officer's shoulder crackled to life. A voice came through, urgent but controlled. We have a visual on the suspect. Male, dark jacket, heading east on Maple. Ms. Carter's heart jumped. That was only a few blocks away. The officer's posture straightened. Copy that. Keep eyes on him. Turning back to the group, he said, We may have found him. We'll be in touch. And just like that, the officers were gone, moving quickly. Through the door, their radios buzzing as they coordinated with the units in pursuit. The room fell silent. Saturdays, Thompson let out a shaky breath, smoothing Emily's hair as she whispered, It's okay, baby. You're safe. Miss Carter stayed by their side, offering what little comfort she could. She's okay, she reassured softly. That's what matters. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours. Then, the phone at the front desk rang. One of the other staff members answered, nodding quickly before turning to Ms. Carter. It's the police, she said. They got him. Relief washed over Ms. Carter so fast, she nearly felt lightheaded. The officers returned not long after, their expressions calmer now. The lead officer approached Miss Thompson. We caught him trying to get into a car a few streets down, he said. We're still identifying him, but we found something on him. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. Flipping it open, inside, written in neat handwriting, was Emily's name. her daycare address, the time she was usually dropped off and picked up. Ms. Carter's stomach twisted. He had been tracking her. Ms. Thompson's hand covered her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. The officer flipped another page. "We also found other names, other children." Ms. Carter's breath hitched. This wasn't just about Emily. The officer's jaw tightened. "We'll be investigating further, but it looks like this wasn't the first time he's tried something like this." A heavy silence settled over the room. Ms. Thompson held Emily tighter, rocking her slightly, as if trying to shield her from the reality of what had nearly happened. Ms. Carter swallowed the lump in her throat. "What happens now?" she asked. The officer's voice was firm. "He's in custody. We'll be working to identify all the children on this list and notify their families. We're also going to find out how he got this information." Ms. Carter nodded, but a deep unease remained in her chest. The thought of someone lurking in the background, watching children, tracking their schedules. It was terrifying, but at least now, this man wouldn't get another chance. Emily yawned, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. Exhausted from the overwhelming night, Ms. Thompson kissed the top of her head. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at Ms. Carter. Ms. Carter exhaled, offering a small, tired smile. "I'm just glad she's safe." Outside, the flashing red and blue lights of the patrol cars faded into the night as the officers drove away, taking with them the man who had nearly disappeared with an innocent child. And just like that, the nightmare was over. But none of them would ever forget how close it had come.